All right. I think we're live. If anyone in the chat can hear me, just push 1. I don't think anybody can hear me. Maybe I'm having some audio issues. Let me just verify this real quick. Yeah, just push 1 in the chat if you can hear me. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, cool. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is Black Politics episode 786. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Also, if you want to get on the panel and engage, there'll be a link in the chat. Make sure you update your Zoom client before joining, or else you won't be able to join. All right, tonight's topic, false doctrine is not a strategy for progress. Here's the deal about this. We have a lot of Black men in these Black social spaces claiming to be conservative. They're claiming to be, these right-leaning people, okay? Politically speaking. But we know now, based on the content that we're going to show, that this is a false doctrine. Many Black men have adopted these ideas and these ideologies as a way to align themselves with Anglo-Saxon people. And you see it reflected in their content. You see it reflected in the chat rooms and the message boards. But what we now know is that a lot of Black men have been pushing false doctrine in the manosphere, or what we call the manosphere. And it's simple. It's a way to stagnate progress so that they don't actually have to move forward. And they want to spread the ideology and false doctrine so that nobody else moves forward. And so what we're going to get into first, let me pull up the content. Oh, actually, let me drop the link in the chat in case some people want to come up and defend some of these Negroes. Okay. We're always here for healthy debate. So we will drop the link in the chat and then we'll move forward. And if nobody comes up, and then we'll just peel up out of here. And if anyone wants to come up, we'll entertain the conversation. Ayo, peace. Ronan Unsung, peace. Emmanuel Briggs, peace. Thank you for joining. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Let's get started. All right. First item, let's go to the North Carolina. Hold on 1 second. Let me just pull up the docket. Let me pull up the docket. And then share. All right, let me know if you can see the screen.
Hey, what's up, Mike?
Wait, what's going on, Renaissance, man?
Yeah. This is yeah. I was hoping you go play this one tonight. This is for all the people who suggest that if they want reparations, they're going to vote Republicans because Democrats won't pass it, or that or they're not going to vote unless they get reparations.
Absolutely.
Just listen to him in his commentary.
Yep, and conservative. So, all right, let's play it.
Reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes. Why do you owe? Because somebody in those fields took stripes for you. Somebody, after those fields were ended and slavery was ended, somebody had to walk through Jim Crow for you. Somebody fought wars and died for you. Somebody lived less than because they didn't have what you have, and they did it for you. There are people in their graves right now, and they are there because they were willing to stand up and fight for you. Those folks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge carrying American flags, take that, Colin Kaepernick, living in a society that he could scarcely acknowledge, something that he has never known, living with a bigotry that none of us can imagine. Carried American flags on that bridge, and when they were hit upside the head with nightsticks and shot with water hoses and knocked to the ground, they got up and picked those flags up and kept marching. And they did it for you. Nobody owes you anything. If anybody owes, it's you. Because you've been the benefactor of freedom. You are the one that owes.
Unbelievable. What's your take on this, Renaissance?
I was going to say before you played too, just for context, Mark Robinson, it took me a minute to realize this, but he is the man who went viral for going down to a town hall to discuss banning of AR-15s. And he basically, I did not realize this until this video came out, but he is actually the lieutenant general, sadly to say, in North Carolina, and he is now running for governor. I'm sorry, he's a lieutenant governor, and he is now running for governor of North Carolina. So that's just some background on how this guy came to get into his political position, is that he basically went viral, which seems to be an aspiration of a lot of Black Republicans. He actually turned it into a political position instead of a television show. But yeah, that's his background. But no, he's clearly pandering. What he's saying makes no sense. It's insensitive. And he's basically pandering to the crowd. The idea that you somehow owe people who really did not sit there and voluntarily suffer in the sense of what he's trying to lay out. Now, yes, people did fight to make things better, but it was not out of some, I'm going to sign up for slavery so my people can be better. It was, no, this is a really, really bad institution, and I don't want any people after me to have to suffer a similar fate. So it's what conservatives do. Burgess Owens had this similar line of commentary during the HR 40 hearings. I believe his name was Austin Chang. He was running for position up in Michigan. He didn't talk about reparations, but he talked about Black History Month, saying he wanted to get rid of it because it's offensive. And you had the lieutenant governor in Virginia, Winston Sears, when she ran. Really playing on this very similar rhetoric of basically Black America is in the position it's in because of its own decisions, and basically trying to downplay any sort of systemic racism, or basically trying to suggest that slavery doesn't have any bearing on the current condition.
Well, that sounds pretty ironic because we just heard another content creator, by the name of Mumia, he said something very similar. And so what's happening in the manosphere is that you see a lot of Black men really gravitating to this sort of rhetoric, right? It's false doctrine. I call it false doctrine because it's ahistorical. It has no historic grounding at all. What he's saying, and we'll play it again, and welcome Man of Tomorrow in the Gone. I want to play this one more time just so that everybody who's just now coming into the chat understand what we're talking about here. Let's play this again.
Reparations in this country. They wanted reparations. And I remember I made this particular liberal so angry at me because I told them right to their face, nobody owes you anything for slavery. If you want to tell the truth about it, it is you who owes. It's you who owes. Why do you owe? Because somebody in those fields took stripes for you. Somebody, after those fields were ended and slavery was ended, somebody had to walk through Jim Crow for you. Somebody fought wars and died for you. Somebody lived less than because they didn't have what you have, and they did it for you. There are people in their graves right now, and they are there because they were willing to stand up and fight for you. Those folks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge carrying American flags, take that, Colin Kaepernick, living in a society that he could scarcely acknowledge, something that he has never known, living with a bigotry that none of us can imagine. Carried American flags on that bridge, and when they were hit upside the head with nightsticks and shot with water hoses and knocked to the ground, they got up and picked those flags up and kept marching. And they did it for you. Nobody owes you anything. If anybody owes, it's you. Because you've been the benefactor of freedom. You are the one that owes.
Unbelievable. Unreal.
And another thing, I'll say really quick too, Mike. If you notice, none of his appeal is factually based. It's very emotionally driven. Mm-hmm. It's very story driven. If you read a book like From Here to Equality by Dr. Sandy Darity,
yep.
He lays out the facts, how many people benefited from slavery, how it still affects Black America today. All those things are laid out. And this is another thing that conservatives, Black or white, are notorious for is really narratives and emotional appeals versus really, really trying to talk to any sort of facts here. And to his last point where he talked about, Colin Kaepernick lives in a society with a bigotry, or that he has a bigotry that we could never imagine. This is the same society where a 16-year-old Black boy literally knocked on someone's door to try to go pick up the siblings and is shot twice, with the homeowner saying that he does not belong in this neighborhood, and claiming that he fears for his life. So, I mean,
and the same homeowner also was just watching Fox News, just watching Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. So, I mean, when he tries to talk like this bigotry is something that's, way, way back in the day, I'm not sure what America he's really talking about.
What's going on, MOT? What do you think about this? Okay, I think MOT stepped away. Let's go to Nagone 11. What's going on, Nagone? What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. First of all, we've talked about this behind the scenes a little bit, but like I said, I totally agree actually with what Renaissance Man is saying right here. Just looking at this, it's a little tough to watch. We have to look, but I always have to say this. We have to look at the history. We always have to look at history. We can't, ignore that. This is something we've been seeing going on a very long time, and here we're still in the middle of it. We're still dealing with this. So I'm just going to say that for right now, and I want you guys to kind of go ahead, continue on with the conversation. But I want to say things are changing, but there's a lot that's still the same. I think we have to look very realistically at what we are looking at what we are dealing with. And let's not try to make any excuses. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Go to MOT.
I mean, like, see, you don't have Jewish men going around saying that you don't deserve the Holocaust.
No, you don't deserve reparations for the Holocaust.
Yeah. You don't have like, this is only allowed to happen in Black America. It's like I clicked on one conservative channel, and you would not believe how many of these Black conservative channels have hundreds of thousands of followers based on them trolling themselves. And it's always something to make the liberals so mad. It has nothing to do with anything that's policy based. Like, the microphone should have been cut off in the middle of that dude speaking. Like, who is the audience who needs to hear this type of information come from a Black guy trying to run to represent who? Who is he trying to represent with that?
Rural white North Carolinians.
Yeah.
But look at the history at MOT. Look at the history. I mean, I keep saying, look at the history. You're talking about, it almost makes too much sense. Look at the history. You look at other groups who have gotten reparations for their issues. We don't. You got some Negro jumping up there talking about he's representing, the white population pretty much, or those who feel, as though that, you don't deserve anything because we have to ignore what has gone on in the past. And that's what these people are really pandering to. They're pandering to that crowd. I mean, I don't see many of them ethnicities out here, running that down. I just don't see it. But that's Negroes. That's the extreme confusion and kind of somewhat madness that we have going on in our community to try to placate and live side by side, or I would say with white America. And this is an issue. We're going to have to resolve this somehow. And I think these types of conversations and this fight or this conversation with reparations is a very important one. We have very confused Black people out here, and we are not looking at history. Anyway, go ahead.
It seems like to me that a lot of Black men are jockeying for space this election cycle, whether it's this lieutenant governor here or it's what's his face, Tim Scott running for president, Larry Elder trying to run for president. A lot of Black men on that side, man, north of 40, man, are trying to climb that conservative carousel and hoping that they be the chosen ones, man. Excuse me. And what you're seeing, and what you're seeing now, it's going to be a knockdown draft. Because how come none of these Black men are working together, right?
No, Mike. I heard someone term it the other day. There's a lot of opportunity going on right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The opportunist.
Yeah.
The opportunist, man. That's all it is.
Yeah, but it's still a carousel though, right? Because where's Dr. Ben Carson? Where's he at now? Nobody even knows.
Maybe asleep somewhere or eating some Oreos.
Yeah, but the point of the matter here is that once they were done with him, man, they pump and dumped him, man. I don't think these guys in the manosphere really understand that they're literally being pumped and dumped by the Republican Party.
Yeah, man. It's like, imagine her. Thanks for the ride, surgeon. And just got rid of him.
I mean, at the end of the day, here's the thing. The funny thing is, you would think people would get the hint. I mean, you just had Tucker Carlson escorted out of Fox News. Now, Grant, this guy was the most watched and one of the highest paid anchors in the business, and they got rid of him. So, I mean, these Black men, I hope they realize they're only getting a quick buck out of this. Because if he could go, you certainly can too.
Trust me. As soon as you cost too much money, up out of there. Same thing happened to Bill O'Reilly. His ratings was XYZ, during that same time slot. The only thing you have to do is read off the teleprompter. But the moment you start causing too many problems in the workplace, same as Bill O'Reilly, and as soon as you start costing too much money, they get rid of you. Oh, and the video that people should look up if you really want to see this opportunity in action, look up the video. Everything I was taught about slavery was wrong. And then you're going to hear, and then you're going to see it. I think it's some black conservative or something like that, like that's the actual name, who actually is there reacting and responding to misinformation. And they just let it go on. It's crazy.
Yeah, because a lot of black men in this space don't really understand that they're expendable to that movement. They're completely expendable. They'll interchange you for another one. Okay. Where's King Randall at now? All of this high praise for King Randall last year, and what has come, where are we at now? April going into May? You ain't heard nothing about Republicans surrounding King Randall in his supposed school.
Will you have your next viral clip? I mean, that's the thing. You go from Diamond and Silk, to King Randall, to the guy in the town hall talking about how he has 2 medical degrees.
Oh yeah,
so racism can exist. Like,
yeah,
it's a yearly thing. Someone goes viral, you get your 5 minutes of fame, and then someone else is going viral for saying something else even crazier.
The guy who's a modern Renaissance man, that's literally the name of his channel, the opportunist who said that there can't be no CRT. Look at how well I'm doing. And it's like, what in the world?
Running around in scrubs too. Running around in his work scrubs. I would think that that's a occupational hazard within the workplace, especially with those brown stains on the back of him. But let's play this clip here, because I think this is a perfect segue into what the history of conservatism is. 5-minute clip. Let's go through it.
Across the state, in which all you need is a high school diploma to enter. So I attended Los Angeles City College initially for virtually nothing, just small fees you had to pay. And then I spent 2 years there, earned an Associate of Arts degree. And then I transferred to the second tier of the system, which was the California State University at Los Angeles. And that's a 4-year, well, actually, the state universities can offer a master's degree, but it's basically a 4-year training institution. And I spent, 2 years, a year and a half there, I guess. And then I transferred to the University of California at Berkeley, where I earned the undergraduate degree. And then I earned a master's at UCLA before I moved on to Howard to get the PhD. So all of this was free, without just pay nominal student fees, no tuition. And it was a remarkable opportunity to get an education without debt. I mean, students today have enormous debt. And I graduated from college without any debt. I got student loans, but I got the student loans largely to buy cars and not to pay.
Yeah, because y'all killed the car driving out there.
Driving up to Berkeley, my old Falcon was killed, and I got a student loan, and I got a 1967 green Mustang.
Lord have mercy.
The generosity of those student loans. Ronald Reagan came to office committed to ending free tuition in the university system. So shortly after he took office, they began to gradually increase tuition. So now the University of California is almost expensive as most private institutions.
Unbelievable.
That, of course,
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, that, of course, Joe Biden today talks about free tuition for junior colleges, but there's no reason why this country could not provide free. There's no reason why the country as a whole could not do what California did from the 50s and the 60s. Well, it was a conservative backlash against education, really.
Well, that's what I was going to say. One of the books that you've published In fact, I want to say, was this 2010? You did the book on conservatism and racism being essentially the same thing.
I think it was 20. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, but I know you say in the book that of all the books, and of course, one of the many books you've done that's had a great impact on me and so many of my generation is your book, We Have No Leaders. And
Right.
while you hold that book up, you also say that conservatism and racism are the same thesis. You know, help me. I think you say in the book that you consider that to be perhaps one of your greatest accomplishments in terms of that thesis, because it seems like
Yes, I think my most influential book was We Have No Leaders.
Yes.
And I think it makes an important contribution. But conservatism and racism and why in America they are the same, I would say is a book that I probably have the most admiration for, I suppose, because it lays out a thesis that's very controversial. Even now it's controversial. Last year, I guess it was at Georgetown, their diversity center, their multiculturalism center, put that book on its reading list for its students to read books about racism in America. And there was a huge controversy. The conservative students protested, and eventually they had to take the book off the reading list.
Really?
Yeah, that was at Georgetown University.
And Georgetown Law just had a big contretemps with two of their professors. It seemed like if any place needs to read that book, it would be Georgetown. they had that kind of pushback.
But the conservative students on campus said, he's calling me a racist. He's saying all conservatives are racist. That was not their argument. My argument was that if anyone embraces, in a strict ideological sense, the tenets of conservatism in America, that will have the same effect on Black people as if they're racist. Ronald Reagan was, as far as we can tell, probably not a racist, but he was a doctrinaire conservative, which led him to oppose every civil rights bill, whether it was in California or the United States, because he said the federal government did not have the authority to require Alabama to treat Black people equally. So, and we see the same thing today. Conservative ideology, a rigid adherence to it inevitably leads in the United States. This is historically the case, and it's the case today. The effect of that is racism. And the very title of the book elicited anger, as you might expect, from conservatives who thought that was a slur.
Now, one thing people can't do, no one can do, including this, your personal journey, is accuse you of allowing ideology to trump hardcore research. In fact, you say near the end of the book that you've spent your career to date documenting the critical ideological material and structural constraints that confine Blacks as a collectivity to subordinate position in America. And so while they might not like what you say, and in fact, you talk some about African-American attitudes towards immigration and how the data might lead people to findings that might be controversial. But I want to think about, so Reagan is now the governor of California. And you're there at a point when education has opened up in many ways. And you talk about your awakening at all of those levels. In fact, one of the brothers you dedicate the book to. But I mean, quite frankly, everyone reading, the people you engage, from Angela Davis to the work of Malcolm X and Mary Baraka, so many others. And then, coming into the whole Us Panther conflict and being there in the whole, I mean, it seems like it's a really stunning array. And by the time you get to Berkeley, of course, a man who we've talked to at the Black Table, who will ultimately be part of recruiting you to Howard to go to school and eventually to work, Andrew Billingsley.
Yes.
At Berkeley. I mean, could you help us understand, give us a glimpse of what the milieu was at that moment? Because, the 60s.
At Los Angeles City College, I was unengaged politically, didn't take part in any kind of campus activities. And I transferred to Cal State LA. And there you had a large mass of Black people. There were very few at Los Angeles City College. But at Cal State LA, you had a large number of Black students. And they already had a well-established Black student union. And so that brought me into the struggle. Coming in unengaged, Booker T. Washington mindset. Then come to Cal State LA, and I meet this brother Omar X, and he turns me on to the struggle. He introduces me first to Malcolm X. I had this impression of Malcolm that he was, you know, the news media's image of Malcolm.
Of course.
Violent and anti-white, and
of course.
I was particularly bothered by his remarks about the assassination of President Kennedy and the chickens coming home to roost. And Omar said, man, forget about that. First, just go read the book.
You know what's fascinating about this? Alice Wyndham, one of the things, who just made transition in St. Louis, who of course was living in Ghana with Maya Angelou, that was her roommate. She says the same thing about Shirley Graham Du Bois. She said when Malcolm came to Ghana, he wanted to meet Nkrumah. They went to Shirley Graham Du Bois to help her, ask her if she'd make the introduction. And she said, well, based on these reports, I don't know if I like Malcolm. She said once they introduced her to Malcolm, she sat with him. She went straight to Nkrumah and said, "You got to talk to this guy." So I mean, so when he introduced you to Malcolm, it kind of opened you up. Huh?
It opened me up, and I read the autobiography, and then he had tapes of Malcolm's speeches, and that was within, I don't know, 6 months after his transformation, because the truth of Malcolm's teachings were obvious. I just did not know those teachings, but once I learned them, that was the key to my opening my eyes. So Omar, I dedicate the book to Omar because without him, I don't know whether I think I probably would have made that journey, but it probably would have been slower and less active without his engagement. He was a student at Cal State LA. We worked together at the post office on the loading dock, and so we were constantly talking politics. And he was the chair of the Black Studies Committee at Cal State LA. And he appointed me to that committee, which is how I began my engagement with the Black Studies.
So you're at the family.
So I wanted to play this clip, okay? Anybody who thinks they're a conservative, come up here. The link is in the chat. I want to hear you explain the history of conservatism for Black people. Conservatism and racism. A whole thesis written on this. Come up here and defend this.
There was a guy in here popping off for a second, a Me Too Judah. I don't know what he is, but I asked him to come up because I feel that if he, I don't want anyone to be intimidated, like, oh, we're gonna come in, we're gonna try to jump you and all that kind of stuff. Very much like to see one of these guys come here and please defend that position. Let's look at the history. Let's talk about the conservative principles. What you consider to be conservative? What is conservative? What is conservatism? What is Black conservatism? Mm-hmm. How does it relate to Black people through the Republican Party, if you want to say, and through the Democratic Party, if you will? Come up here, please explain that and talk about how this will this is beneficial for Black Afro-American people, Afro-American men, since we're here in the manosphere and we're going to be speaking and we talk mostly things about Black men here. Let's have that conversation. This is not a jump or anything else like that. Come in here, let's have a conversation, a good one, and let's exchange some ideas and let's have that conversation. I've yet to see any one of you guys get up here and defend, and I would be very interested for you to do that. So, Metu Judah, if you are there, please step up to the plate. Let's have a chance to kind of talk this out a little bit. And anybody else who may be lurking around, who are lurking around, come up here as well. We very much welcome that conversation. If you think that we're just pushing Democratic Party ideals or so forth, if you think that, please come up and show that as well. I'd be very interested. All right, thanks.
Yeah.
MOT, you had something to say?
No, it's just at the end of the day, this stuff is ahistorical, and most people don't even know. They're just like, okay, where are the Black women at? What's the opposite of where Black women at? That's where I'm at. Doesn't matter about the history, doesn't matter about anything. They just put their hands in their ears, and then they don't even bother to even learn anything. And what they want to do is they just want to be a drain on the actual conversation by deliberately not knowing anything. So I don't know if you can even help these people. So
Go ahead, Renaissance man.
No, I was going to point out that, really look at what he talked about in the beginning when he talked about how cheap and inexpensive college education was in the 50s and 60s in California. And really, you could argue probably was one of the things, it's definitely one of the things that has led to the boom in that state. And this is one thing Scott Galloway talks about as well. He talks about, he went to UCLA. He's not a professor at NYU, but he has a podcast as well. But yeah, he talks about how essentially, when he was going to school, UCLA was a school that had like an 80% acceptance rate and the tuition was next to nothing. And now it's like a single digit acceptance rate. And, the tuition is like $60,000. Dr. Ronald Smith in that clip talks about how, Ronald Reagan comes to power out of California, basically saying, he was going to end free college. And, we've seen sort of the fallout from it as a result where, people are in tons of debt. And a lot of people like to sit up here and pretend like, people being educated doesn't benefit the society when it definitely does.
But that's the purpose of democracy, right? You have to have an informed society in order for it to operate. But it seems to me that there's a lot of Black men who are like, well, I don't know if I want to pay, I want my tax dollars paying for, anyone's college or anything like that. And it's like, well, white people have been going to school for free for a long time. What are you talking about, man?
And it would disproportionately benefit Black men when you start looking at where Black men are in, the income distribution versus educational attainment levels and what a degree has on your income, your future earnings. It is something that disproportionately would help Black men, but some guys are opposed to it. I dropped another link in the chat if you want to play that one as well. It's a pretty short clip.
Yeah, let me just run this back because I know there's new people showing up. I just want to make sure I hit the talking point home that Dr. Robert C. Smith wrote. He actually passed away last week, so that, I think it was perfect timing for this segment.
Y'all killed the car driving out there.
Right. Driving up to Berkeley here, my old Falcon was killed, and I got a student loan, and I got a 1967 green Mustang.
Lord have mercy. Well, that's so funny.
The generosity of those student loans. Ronald Reagan, of course, came to office committed to ending free tuition in the university system. So shortly after he took office, they began to gradually increase tuition. So now the University of California is almost expensive as most private institutions. And that's
unbelievable.
That, of course,
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, that, of course, Joe Biden today talks about free tuition for junior colleges, but there's no reason why this country could not provide free. There's no reason why the country as a whole could not do what California did from the 50s and the 60s. Well, it's a conservative backlash against education, really.
Well, that's what I was going to say. One of the books that you've published, in fact, I want to say, was this 2010? You did the book on conservatism and racism being essentially the same thing.
I think it was 20. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, but I know you say in the book that of all the books, and of course, one of the many books you've done that's had a great impact on me and so many of my generation is your book, We Have No Leaders. And
right.
While you hold that book up, you also say that conservatism and racism are the same thesis. Help me. I think you say in the book that you consider that to be perhaps one of your greatest accomplishments in terms of that thesis, because it seems like
I think my most influential book was We Have No Leaders.
Yes.
And I think it makes an important contribution. But conservatism and racism and why in America they are the same, I would say is a book that I probably have the most admiration for, I suppose, because it lays out a thesis that's very controversial. Even now it's controversial. Last year, I guess it was at Georgetown, their diversity center, their multiculturalism center, put that book on its reading list for its students to read books about racism in America. And there was a huge controversy. The conservative students protested, and eventually they had to take the book off the reading list.
Really?
Yeah, that was at Georgetown University.
And Georgetown Law just had a big contretemps with two of their professors. Seems like if any place needs to read that book, it would be Georgetown. they had that kind of pushback.
But the conservative students on campus said, he's calling me a racist. He's saying all conservatives are racist. That was not their argument. My argument was that if anyone embraces, in a strict ideological sense, the tenets of conservatism in America, that will have the same effect on Black people as if they're racist. Ronald Reagan was, as far as we can tell, probably not a racist, but he was a doctrinaire conservative. Which led him to oppose every civil rights bill, whether it was in California or the United States, because he said the federal government did not have the authority to require Alabama to treat Black people equally. So, and we see the same thing today. Conservative ideology, a rigid adherence to it inevitably leads in the United States. This is historically the case, and it's the case today. The effect of that is racism. And the very title of the book elicited anger, as you might expect, from conservatives who thought that was a slur.
Now, one thing people can't do, no one can do, and including this, your personal journey, is accuse you of allowing ideology to trump hard, cold research. In fact, you say near the end of the book that you've spent your career to date documenting the critical ideological material and structural constraints that confine Blacks as a collectivity to subordinate position in America. And so while they might not like what you say, and in fact, you talk some about African-American attitudes towards immigration and how the data might lead people to findings that might be controversial. But I want to think about, so Reagan is now the governor of California. And you're there at a point when education has opened up in many ways. And you talk about your awakening at all of those levels. In fact, one of the brothers you dedicate the book to. But I mean, I quite frankly, everyone reading, the people you engage, from Angela Davis to the work of Malcolm X and Mary Baraka, so many others. And then, coming into the whole Us Panther conflict and being there in the whole, I mean, it seems like it's a really stunning array. And by the time you get to Berkeley, of course, a man who we've talked to at the Black Table, who will ultimately be part of recruiting you to Howard to go to school. And eventually,
let me just stop it there, because again, what we're talking about, there's no history to back up what these guys are talking about. Okay. You have a lot of people who say, oh, I'm a Black conservative, but that doesn't make any sense. Not according to, Dr. Smith, Dr. Robert Smith, and not according to the history. How can you claim this ideology with no historic grounding? Because you can't be racist too, right? For Black men, they can't be racist, right? They have to actually adopt that ideology in order to appease white men who claim to be conservative too. Because there is no other way for this, right? I mean, Michael Steele, as much as he's a Republican and a conservative, he's not their conservative, if that makes any sense. Go ahead, Emilty.
So what the problem is it's like, what modern Renaissance man, like most Black conservatives do, they switch it from a historical argument to a circumstantial argument. So what they do is they go from, well, there can't be racism because there's still rich Black people. You had rich Black people back then, but you also had a whole bunch of other things that were going on. So they're always the master of swapping the actual argument and deliberately not understanding the actual historical importance of things and how they actually go together. Well, like, it's kind of like, well, you know what? Michael Jordan's a millionaire. How come you're not one? It's like, that's really not how that works, man. Like, you can't really just keep swapping the argument, but the actual idea is to tire you out so that way you can't have the conversation, at least honestly and openly. And that's what they do. Like I said, it gets to the the nihilistic and the sociopathic nature of people who just don't want to learn the history, because the blinders fall off when you learn the history, and now you have to come to grips with the fact that you were wrong. But you could just dodge all that and just troll your way through the actual conversation. I mean, other races just don't allow this type of historical thing to keep going on, but it just seemed to be a mainstay here. So,
Absolutely. Let's play this last clip from Renaissance Man.
Do with the health debate. I think what we see in the health debate is that in these town hall meetings have opened up the first opportunity that the radical right has had to come back and mobilize against Barack Obama. So when you look at what people are saying, some of it has to do with health, but a lot of it has to do with the broad outlines of his all of his public policy. So what we have to look at this really is political opposition to Barack Obama. To that extent, some of it is racial. Some people are using racial slogans, and some are using this saying in effect party slogans, and the two are mixed. But yeah, I mean, some of it has to do with race. There's no question about that. But I put this in the general category of their opposition to the fact that he's in the White House. Period. They lost the election. I mean, and this is the first chance they've had really, and been egged on by their leadership to oppose everything that he's done.
Despite whether it's in their interest or not.
That's right. I mean, the thing that the Republicans have had a tradition of doing is mobilizing poor people against their own interests. And that's one of the amazing things to me, that they've been able to do it. Except that what it appears that they're able to sell them is a subtle version of white supremacy, which allows them to privilege that over any policy gains they might make.
At least I'm not black.
Right. I wrote about that this week. I mean, you hear this woman's shrill voice in the debate, one of the town hall meetings, talking about, I want my country back. Well, what the hell is she talking about? I mean, it has been taken over by a foreign alien power. Yeah, to her it has. And the alien power has a black face. And that's what a lot of these people are responding to.
That's a perfect clip, Renaissance. It actually segues perfectly into this conversation. I think that Black men are caught in between all of this, because they have no real way of rationalizing their existence within that party, and they can't stand the left, or what they consider to be the left, and the institution of the Democratic Party, because of what they claim to be historic reasons that, again, is not really historic. What's happening here is that they're being allowed, or I shouldn't say they're being allowed, but they're being influenced to work against their best interests, to sabotage the progress of Black people, to all that for proximity to white male patriarchy. You see, this is interesting because patriarchy does not distribute power and privilege, not in that capacity. Maybe to white women, but not to Black men. There's no such thing as, Black men sitting on the same throne with white men. It ain't gonna happen. Not at least not in the last 400 years. That hasn't happened.
Just a little context. So, person speaking in that clip was actually Dr. Ronald Walters. So
yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, so Dr. Ronald Walters, Dr. Ronald Smith. So, two Dr. Ronalds today. Dr. Ronald Walters actually wrote a book entitled "White Nationalism, Black Interest, Conservative Public Policy in the Black Community."
Yep.
So he very much, he also was involved. I believe he actually been the campaign manager for Jesse Jackson when he ran for president back in the 80s.
84.
Yeah, 84. But yeah, he has some very interesting takes and analysis on, his view on what conservative policy and what it really is, and how it's really really goes at Black America. I think you hear in both clips, this idea of conservatism, if the individual is not outright racist, the outcome, the thinking, and the ideology will still have the same effect on the Black community. It's
So they're
just
hoping for a trickle down effect.
Yeah. It's like whether you just, like you said, whether you either just that's your motivation or you just claim to hold on these conservative principles. Like Dr. Ronald Smith said. Ronald Reagan said, "Hey, the federal government didn't have the authority to make the state of Alabama treat its citizens, its Black citizens equally," which is crazy.
And you have Black men running right behind that. That's the part that I don't understand. Black men running right behind, Ronald Reagan being the valedictorian of the Republican Party, the darling of the Republican Party in modern day conservatism, and Black men run right behind that. But then complain that Joe Biden in the 94 crime bill. Make sense for MLT.
Right after it. And it's like, you don't understand the actual history. And it's like, these people have been in this space for 15, but really the mainstream opposition of the actual oppositional conservative within the space have been here since the Trump's election, and they haven't really studied up on the history or even tried to learn about what the positions are or anything. I mean,
MOT's mic is breaking up a lot.
I was going to say, Mike, listen, let's call out. Most of these guys don't even know what a conservative is. They don't know They don't know what conservative principles truly are. They don't know it. They don't understand the true conservative platform. We've broken this down many times here on the Brain Trust in the past. We've broken it down, gone over it deeply, talked about the 64 RNC with Barry Goldwater and how the whole really conservative platform kind of came out of, that's the modern day, if we want to talk about political conservative platform that came out and was utilized by or used by the Republican Party. We have spoken on this many times, because conservatism or conservatism is not strictly a Republican Party concept. It's not. But yet it was adopted by the Republican Party, and then certain kinds of things came in to kind of alter and how to say mutated. But yet no one speaks from a real conservative perspective platform here. That's why some people get mad, and I've called them out on saying, "Hey, listen, you're not a real conservative." And they get angry. What are you talking about? They start screaming because they don't know. They don't have a clue. And the history is just not there. A lot of these guys probably don't even vote either. But I don't want to say that as well. But a lot of these guys do not understand what a real conservative is. And when you talk about it from a policy perspective, they are lost in the woods. They have no idea what you're talking about. And then they want to sit here and talk about ultimately submission of Black women and a whole lot of other patriarchy that they don't even truly even understand. They have no idea what they're talking about with respect to that. Don't understand any part of this historical factor at all. But yet they want to come here and say, you guys just want to put your Democratic Party. What? Do you guys even understand what you're even talking about? They don't. That's the problem. And we're here in this sector of the manosphere trying to get some sensibility with respect to this. And a lot of these guys ultimately are just looking like they just want to literally carry gray boys. They want to carry their briefcases when these guys are not down with you like that for quite a few different reasons. And these guys do not want to recognize this. They think they understand it, but they do not. And that's what I'm saying. They're not doing their work. If you are a so-called Black conservative, you should be of the most knowledgeable people coming around here, the most knowledgeable. But obviously, that's not what we're saying.
Go ahead, MLT.
Yeah, but it seems like they only cover a candidate if it's a black woman or it's a black woman involved or a woman. Like, there was no coverage of Marcus Flowers at all. You know, there was no coverage.
MLT, I think your mic is breaking up a lot, MLT.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, just restate what you were saying the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think he was talking about the fact that there's no coverage of, he was pointing out, I think he said the name Marcus Flowers when he ran in Georgia against Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know, there's no coverage of him. There's no coverage of, you know, other black male candidates, Charles Booker, Gary Chambers.
Well, those are Democrats, but let's talk about Republican, right? What about John James in Michigan? None of these guys covered it.
Yeah, no, John James. No, Marcus Flowers was a Democrat as well, wasn't he?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying those guys were Democrats. Well, what about the Republicans like John James? Right?
Oh,
John,
okay, yeah.
Yeah, John James, you know, for all of the conservatism in this space, I didn't hear these guys covering him or trying to invite him to the manosphere or anything like that. But they expect, you know, Mandela Barnes to come to the space to talk to them about what? You're not even a registered voter in Wisconsin. It's really strange to see black men roam around, you know, social media like this. And these are not like, you know, 16, 17-year-olds. These are, you know, men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Some of them in their 60s, and they believe these sort of ideals. And so I think what we're trying to do, or at least what I'm making an attempt to do tonight, is to actually add some clarity, you know, pour a clean glass of water so that people can get a better understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah. That's what Chad said, so I should be fine now.
Yeah.
All right, so the problem is that the type of conservatism that they have, it maintains the idea that they don't have to study anything. They don't have to look anything up, and they can just still troll black women. So as long as they have their boundaries of what conservatism is, it doesn't really require any participation or learning about history, because their idea of conservative is, I'm going to troll this black woman, and I'm going to hold back progress to prove how powerful I am. It's not about moving anything forward legislatively, because that's just never been their position, or else they have their type of conservative style campaign announcements like what you just heard earlier, or even with a historical like the senator from South Carolina, not really keeping in mind the actual things that they were actually fighting against were white conservatives. They never say that. But that's clearly what they're talking about. So it's just crazy that they don't even try to even learn the history, because that's not what they're there for.
Yeah. And some of these guys are really proud about it, man. They they parade themselves through the manosphere. They sashay around, kind of like RuPaul doing, work to the left, work to the right, just and when they can't promote conservatism, they talk about, Kamala Harris, and mispronounce her name all the time. Always mispronouncing her name, man. Kamala. And it's like, it's Kamala, man. Let's get the name right first, and then let's talk about her track record before you can even engage the conversation.
I mean, man, but that's their version of Democrat Party.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. When they can't talk about, when they want to talk about the left, or they can't talk about the left, it's, they want to talk about black women, because they see black women as the left, right? To them, there's no such thing as a conservative black woman. Forget about the lieutenant governor in Virginia under Glenn Youngkin.
Winston Sears.
Yeah, Winston Sears. Thank you. Forget about Mia Love out there in Utah. Dr. Condoleezza Rice. These are not conservative women, that they that these guys even acknowledge. And so to them, there's no such thing as a conservative Black woman. All Black women are on the left. All Black women must be destroyed, including because they are also a part of the Democratic Party, and they must be destroyed. And this sort of logic, this sort of illogical thinking, is consistent with what Dr. Ronald Walters was saying in that clip, that these conservative white men are able to influence Black men in particular to work against their best interests and align themselves with them and not ask for anything. Because you don't hear any Black men who claim to be conservative asking for reparations from the Republican Party or any other candidate from the Republican Party about reparations at all. When you don't see anybody running up in Lindsey Graham's face, you don't see anybody running up in Mitch McConnell's face, you don't see anybody running up in John Kennedy's face. Nobody's going on Tucker Carlson and trying to argue reparations with Tucker Carlson when he used to have a show. And so a lot of these guys are just not really politically literate enough to be a part of a democratic society. I find that these people tend to be very dangerous. And I also want to highlight that, these are two PhDs, Dr. Ronald Walters and Dr. Robert Smith, not to be confused with Robert F. Smith. You don't hear the PhDs in this space really highlighting this either, for all of their credentials and braggadocious rights or braggadocious namesake. You don't hear these guys actually having this conversation at all. They rather talk about Black women in soft boy era. This sort of Black men laying around in Crocs and stroking their beards and stuff, in soft, pajamas and shit like that, this soft boy era. But the link is in the chat if anyone wants to come onto the panel. If not, then we'll just peel up out of here, man. Go ahead, MLT.
Yeah, I mean, there were no mad professors. They were straight to the point, straight with the facts. No face wasn't all on the camera. None of them was claiming SYSPM or nothing like that. They was just talking about straight things that were happening. And when you look at actual PhDs talk, they're very knowledgeable about history. Here, they ignore the history altogether. And it's just crazy that a lot of people actually think that a PhD is supposed to talk down to you and not just inform you about things. And it's just not the case, man. And it's just sad, and it's just a waste of space. And the crazy thing is, you have just two types of people in education: people who are there to educate, to inform, and a lot of other people who just nihilists, who just teach meaningless classes because they specialize. So there's just two different type of men, and it's like the two type of men in the actual manosphere, the same thing. People came here to actually educate themselves on something and actually progress, and then there's another group of people who want nothing but endless entertainment. It's kind of the same thing.
Well, I would just say this very quickly. A lot of people don't want you to talk about history because it riles you up. Don't bring up all this history. It gets you angry. It gets people angry. They don't know what to do. Just don't talk about the history. That's what you'll hear from certain sectors of this sphere, of those who come into the sphere, who may not say that they're part of the manosphere, but they come into the sphere to talk and suppose to have conversation. But they'll say, don't get into the history because it riles you up and will get you angry.
There's a question in it. Go ahead, Renaissance man.
No, I was just gonna quickly say, the ironic thing too is you've gotten guys who don't cover the Trump Black conservatives, but they also didn't cover the moderate Black conservatives, the Colin Powells, the Will Hurds, Even the Michael Steele's of the world, he wasn't in political office, but he was the head of the RNC. They didn't even cover those people really then. So it just, they don't cover the Trump right wingers. They don't even cover the moderates in the Republican Party. So it's like, who do you cover?
Yeah. That was my point earlier about they didn't cover John James. They didn't cover many of the black men who ran for office. Byron Donalds. They didn't cover any of these guys. They just they just kind of focused on what black women were doing, and Joe Biden said he got caught on a Zoom call on a leak on a Zoom call. First of all, it wasn't a leak. It was just it was just a statement of fact that you're going to have to coalition with other groups in order to get progress. But these guys took it out of context and ran with it and justified, running to that other side. And now that they're on the other side, they're like, well, we're doing some things behind the scenes. But I'm like, well, how come you can't do things out in the open? Because you chastise Biden for what he did, what he said on the Zoom call, but you can't actually talk about what you're doing on that side? Come on, man. Go ahead, Multi.
I was gonna say they're not doing anything on the other side. They're not doing anything. They're doing nothing. That's what they're doing, which is bothersome, because if you are going to go to that side, you should be moving and organizing for something, but they're not. I don't know. Maybe MOT has an answer to that.
Go ahead, MOT.
Yeah, but they're not over there clearly not to organize. They're over there to just put it in everybody's face that they don't want progress, and they're not over there to fight for an agenda. And it's like, oh, I'm gonna make them so mad. I'm a conservative. Like that's all they own, man. It's like, you can't have a substance-based conversation because these people are not with the substance.
Right.
And this is why you got to bring around other PhDs so people can see just how out of touch and out of whack and how boring and even ridiculous a lot of these so-called educated people are. You have to just bring other people around who actually care about the actual condition of the people rather than putting together a report that's pretty much giving people fake representation.
Let me answer this question in the chat. A Hill asked a question. Curious about your thoughts on Vivek's historical references and political platform, the firing of Don Lemon. Neither one of them elected officials, so it doesn't have any bearing on this conversation at all. Don Lemon is like apolitical. He's pushed to the left because of his sexual identity, but not necessarily because of his politic. He doesn't really have a politic. If you really think about it, you got to really understand and actually answer what is Don Lemon's politic. He doesn't really have one, to my knowledge. He doesn't really have a politic.
Well, some people are speculating. There are really a couple of things that he got a warning earlier in the year. I can't remember for what. I know they were saying, he had been drinking on that CNN New Year's show.
Yeah.
So I think they put it into that this year. So no drinking. But I think he did. I can't. Oh, the Nikki Haley comment. That's where he got a warning for. He got a warning for that. Kind of telling him he was on thin ice. And then he was interviewing the Indian guy who's running for president on
Vivek?
On the RNC side. He was interviewing him, and Vivek was basically pushing this whole narrative about gun control. And I'm not sorry, not gun control, the Second Amendment, and how he was claiming that Black folks were not able to secure their rights until they can secure their Second Amendment rights. And Don Lemon was actually pushing back, like, hey, we had Jim Crow, we had to have civil rights movement, Reconstruction, all these things. Like, just because people got, some gun rights after the Civil War, doesn't mean that, that Black folks, freedom was guaranteed. He's pushing back on them. And I think he said at some point, he said something to the extent of whatever race you are or something like that. So some people were thinking that could have been the insensitive comment that kind of triggered it, coupled with, I think he had some complaints from some of his coworkers.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to those comments about Nikki Haley. This dude sound like a whole manosphere dude up there. The whole conversation, it was like, oh, well, she's not in her prime and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, you got men who are 80-something years old in office, running for office, and you want to try to make a sexual argument against a woman who's not even that old compared to the man. Little comments were just way out of whack.
But the ironic thing, MOT, is that, you know, when you look at it in the context of the right and the manosphere, his comments are spot on. Like it's rhetoric that you would think that, you know, that these guys would just, you know, would say and think casually. You know, no one's running out saying, hey, Don Lemon was canceled for, you know, for free speech on that side.
Yeah.
Because like I said, look at Fox News and you know, its record of sexism within its ranks. So what he said is just what he said. Really, it got him in trouble with people within, you know, a more progressive or, you know, political side of things. But on the right, his comments would have been looked on like it was nothing.
No, because you just had a Republican in Tennessee just a few weeks ago talking about bringing back lynching for black men to deal with black men, you know, as a form of consequence, man. Nobody really is outraged at what he had to say.
No one covered it.
No one covered it. I don't hear anyone here or supposedly on that side of the fence saying a word about that. Saying a word about it.
Yeah.
Very strange. Very strange.
Yeah, I don't. So to answer A Hill's question, I don't have that much of a dog in the fight when it comes to Don Lemon and Vivek going at it. You know, if you replace Don Lemon with somebody like Michael Eric Dyson, you know, it's a different conversation, and Vivek is going to lose every single time going in. But Don Lemon is not, you know, this huge political figure. He's not a political figure at all, to my understanding. You know, he's just what's considered to be a journalist, you know, for the lack of a better description. And so trying to use Don Lemon as if, oh, well, you know, what's your opinion about him? I don't really have that much of opinion. If anything, you can replace Don Lemon with that guy who does a show every week talking about everybody hates black men. It doesn't sound that much different.
No, I was going to say, if anything, Don Lemon has shown his politics actually, like you said, Mike, outside of his sexual identity, his actual politics, if you look at some of his commentary, have been very actually rooted in a respectability, definitely moderate, maybe even right-wing politics. I mean, when Bill Cosby made the pound cake speech, you know, Don Lemon was coming out saying he basically agreed with him. And he said he agreed with O'Reilly too, because, you know, O'Reilly commented on as well. So Don Lemon actually does not have, you know, that many, you know, moments of, you know, showing to be this leftist figure, other than, like I said, that identity. If anything, I mean, Van Jones, I can't remember if he's still with CNN, but he's way more liberal than a Don Lemon is on that network.
Yeah.
Nah,
and they got rid of
Jones.
They got
fired. It would be a better argument, but no, Lemon, nah.
No, but Trump has come out and said worse things about women, including Hillary, including groping women, raping women, and stuff like that. And that did not stop 52% of white women from voting for fucking Trump. So this idea that, you know, we should be outraged or what's our opinion on this, I think that's a nothing burger, and I'm not hungry. Well, she says I wanted Don Lemon fired until Monday. Well, I don't, you know,
what?
Don Lemon is low-hanging fruit for a lot of people in the space. He's easy to attack. You know, you can kind of you can throw punches at him, and he's not going to respond. That's too easy to me. Like, that's, you know, he's a piñata.
No, he is the CNN equivalent of Joy Reid. Like, yeah, like Joy Reid is low-hanging fruit. Another one that's low-hanging fruit for conservatives. You know, they like to go at her on MSNBC, and it's like, when you look at Joy Reid's rating, it's like people don't watch even Joy Reid like that. Like, one person was saying he thought Joy Reid actually probably got more viewers from people on the right who are more triggered by her than, you know, people on the left. Like, that's who Don Lemon is on CNN.
Yeah. Yeah. So
we know why they cover it, because there's a black woman. You know, they love their anti-black woman rhetoric. So
Well, yeah, Vivek is running for president, but who's going to support him? DeSantis can't even get support. You really think Vivek is going to get more support than DeSantis? Let's stop the cap, man.
More support. Like, what are we talking about here?
You think
Trump's going to be a presumptive nominee, and it's probably going to be Nikki Haley that's going to be the VP. Probably.
Yeah, you think Vivek is going to get more support than Bobby Jindal? Bobby Jindal was the governor of Louisiana. Like, let's compare apples to apples and not apples to, zucchinis and eggplants and stuff, man. Like, yeah.
Apples to pineapples.
Yeah, I mean, people are throwing out Vivek as if he's this credible candidate to go up against Trump. Man, they're gonna mop the floor with this guy. He's never gonna get any sort of campaign contributions at all. And Trump has already got 10 endorsements just in the last 7 days. Like, what are we talking about here?
And none of these people attend the CPAC. Like, most of them didn't even attend the CPAC, no speeches, nothing. Yeah. But you're going to garner all this support. All right, man, I guess.
And not in this space. You're not going to see people in this space try to get behind Vivek. They don't even cover black men. Why would they cover Vivek? And he doesn't have the name brand, the national name brand to really come out and get that support anyways. If anything, he sounds like an Asian computer, Vivek, it sounds like a smartphone from Asia or something like that with Android. But I'm just saying, I don't think, go ahead.
And then I was gonna say like a brand, like almost like a Vizio or something branded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought it was. That's what I thought he was. But, people are really trying to muddy up this conversation in order to not have that conversation. Okay. Yeah. Throwing up all these names and whatnot does not, it doesn't deter from the original conversation that we were having about, conservatism in this space, especially. I dare anybody who claims to be a conservative to jump on the panel and support this after what Dr. Robert C. Smith and Dr. Ronald Waters have covered extensively, and they've been covering it, the last 60, 70 years. I mean, how can you argue against what they're saying? Unfortunately, cats are not going to be vocal about that. Jay Charles says they should get behind Tim Scott. I don't see what the value would be. Why would they get behind Tim Scott? They didn't get behind Michael Steele. They didn't get behind other candidates. Why would they get behind Tim Scott?
I mean, I don't see what
Look at what happened to Herman Cain when he led for a week.
Yeah.
Don't forget, never forget.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, like Tim Scott doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, he's a guy who he's a senator from South Carolina, so you don't really get much there from, getting a swing state or something like that, or, getting back in the running of a swing state. I guess if you think, hey, there's going to be, some black crossover appeal and people are going to vote for this guy. But I mean, like I said, I don't see what Tim Scott brings. He's not someone who I see that's going to energize the base of the party. I don't think he's going to do well with minorities. And like I said, he's from South Carolina, so I don't even think you get a strategic play. You get a state that you're already going to win anyway.
Yeah. And he hasn't passed any real bills within the party to rationalize the justification for being the president anyways. What would be his hallmark? What's his hallmark achievement? It's not the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That's for damn sure.
I mean, it is a good point, because here's the thing. Outside of Trump, DeSantis looks like he can't handle the national stage at this point. His fight with Disney is really, I think, going to backfire on him. People are talking about, hey, this guy's walking around campaigning, while his state is flooding and he's not paying attention to stuff like that. So, I mean, there is, people normally thought it was going to be a Trump DeSantis fight, but there's some space breaking open. So, I mean, I think you're going to see a bunch of retreads, like, basically trying to run for president. Nikki Haley's already announced. I wouldn't be surprised, if Romney or someone like that announces. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, the way he's acting if someone like Greg Abbott announces. The way he's been trying to govern.
Oh, Hot Wheels?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. So I mean, it could go down the list of pretty much looking like 2016 with Trump, where you had the whole cast of characters, everyone pretty much but Newt Gingrich is out there running. So.
Well, Uyori brings up a point that right now none of this stuff is relevant to what happens later on. It's just way too early.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with you that it is early, but I also think that catching that media buzz is good for people who can't raise money.
Well, I mean, is it really too early though? You got to think it's practically May right now.
Yeah.
You're gonna have your primary in the fall, around October, November?
Yeah.
Your convention, where you'd have your primary that's obviously gonna be in November. So is it really too early when you start looking at especially if it's gonna be a crowded field? That's the other thing. If you're gonna have one or two people, then okay, you can kind of push it back more. But if you're like Republicans and you're thinking, Trump's going to get charged, or, and truth be told, a lot of the big money doesn't even want to get behind Trump either. But the alternatives so far don't seem that appealing. So, I think it makes sense to throw your name in the hat now and see if you can actually sway some of the, I believe Murdoch said he wasn't committing to Trump. Your CEO of BlackRock, those people. See if you can get that money behind you now.
They'll go about it through other means. Go ahead, Emilton.
It's just that right now, Trump is the presumptive nominee, and I don't see anybody else who's going to be the presumptive nominee other than him. I just don't see it.
The fact that he can intervene in the midterms, during the swearing in of McCarthy. That should tell you what kind of power he has within the party. I mean, they're on there doing FaceTime videos, FaceTiming with Trump while they withhold their vote for McCarthy.
But Trump has to keep reasserting his control over the party. Otherwise, they're just going to keep trying to organize around his back without him doing anything publicly. I understand him trying to this is still my party. No matter what you think, this is still my party. I may not have the actual money behind me, and all his money goes to him. And if he helps somebody else raise money, most of that money still goes to him too. So that's how Trump works. And that's how come the money people ain't getting behind Trump, because they're not trying to give all their money to him.
Yeah,
clearly.
Because you don't know what's going to happen with him health-wise. He could definitely have a stroke or something like that with all this calamity going on around him. I think go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to address a comment in the chat from A Hill. She said, I did appreciate Tucker, though. He mentioned penalties against Black activists who spoke up on Ukraine. I think they were incarcerated first. I've heard of it, researching more tonight. I can't really speak to that. My whole thing with Tucker Carlson is I have a hard time with anyone Black really taking this guy seriously. His rhetoric, I think you can directly tie it to the shooting up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Guy was floating the great replacement theory. Some young impressionable teenage white kid goes and shoots and kills 18, 19 Black people, based on that rhetoric, and actually walks it back, on later shows. So,
yeah, not just that, but backing up of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah, I mean, so he just did a lot of stuff that was very problematic in my opinion for anybody to really see the value in what he did for Black America.
Yeah. I mean, people will try to find any which way they can, man, to floss their teeth with what's considered to be white conservatives at this point. I don't see how Tucker could walk away from all of his rhetoric over the years during the Trump administration for what he's his backing of Trump. I mean, Trump even said personally, or at least the inner circle has said personally, that he has reached out to Tucker behind the scenes to get his policy done. I mean, this is how inept that, Trump was when he was president. Couldn't really function without actually getting some assistance from TV show hosts like Tucker Carlson, guy whose whole entire, net collective wealth came out of TV dinners, man. Like, I don't know, man.
Hey, the Hungry Man franchise, like that's what this family owned.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, nobody took the bow tie seriously. Like before you had this position, like nobody took the bow tie seriously.
No.
I mean, it's kind of like Rick Santorum being in that position. Nobody take him seriously either. But you have to understand that to them, they have to be squarely in the middle or pretend like they're in the middle. Because like people in the middle, they don't talk like this. They don't talk like this. I don't know anybody in the middle who thinks that Tucker Carlson is a good whatever under no circumstance. But at the end of the day, you just can't be all the way on the left historically because it makes sense. They got to make it look like, oh, I'm hedging my bets. Tucker Carlson, like, come on, man. Like, how many times we gonna go through this? And it's never policy based. It's always just one off. It's never nothing that's real substantive, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's one incident or a meme or something like that they latch on to try to give credit to. And it's like, no, you actually have to do things of substance. Like Harry Belafonte, people who have done things of substance the last fucking 50, 60 years. Like, like no one in the manosphere is even talking about Harry Belafonte for all of his work in his track record, but they'll get behind the Tucker Carlson, man. You can't make this stuff up. And I'm not attacking A. Hill. I'm just making a larger point because her comments are kind of reflective of the manosphere too. There's a lot of guys who kind of on a low, man. They really ride with Fox News and some of those characters on the right over there that don't really amount to much. I mean, we know there's some sycophants in the space, man. Guys who are going on and on about abortion, but don't care about taking care of a village concept. It takes a village to raise a child. They're completely against that concept, but they're also completely against abortion and shit. And it's just like what's doesn't make any sense, man.
No great court decision to actually protect abortion access with a super 6-3 majority. Nobody covered it. It's like you can't take these things seriously.
No, you can't really trust Black conservatives in this space. You can't really trust them, primarily because they're not grounded on anything factual at all. They kind of waver with whatever the wind is blowing when they stick their thumb out the window. Probably should stick their thumb somewhere else at this point. But I don't see anybody coming up, man. I think that if you're just now tuning in, you should probably go back and listen to the beginning of the live stream to really get a good understanding as to what we're talking about in terms of the false doctrine of conservatism. Conservatism and racism, conservatism is a legal place or ideological place for racism to embed itself, and for Black men to try to latch onto it. It's kind of it's really interesting to see guys try to. It's the equivalent of watching. You ever see like have you ever been to like the Basketball Hall of Fame and they have like Shaquille O'Neal's shoes up there, like a size 22 or something like that, and you see kids try to put the shoes on and it doesn't even fit, not even a slight bit, and they're just flopping around. That's the idea that I see. That's the perspective that I have when Black men put on, conservatism as cosplay. They stick their small little itsy bitsy feet inside the shoes of conservatism. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit.
It looks ridiculous. It looks ridiculous.
Try to put. It's kind of like the helmet, the size of a round table. They just try to put it on and it just, collapses down on them. Halfway covering their chest, and they still think that they still got this thing on straight. Crazy.
Yeah. I just think that if you're calling yourself a conservative, now is the wrong time to call yourself a conservative.
Worst time in history. Like I can't think of a worse time try to be, I mean, legislatively and everything else. Just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, look at this comment in the chat, from Bob. He says, I'm okay with abortion as long as I don't pay with my taxes. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
The abortion's not paid for with tax dollars. Like, how many times they have to go over?
Yeah.
But
I
can tell you, they have missed a lot of this lingo. When we start talking once again about the Southern strategy, these people don't understand taxes and states' rights and all this kind of stuff like that. Ultimately, is a euphemism for something else. And these guys just don't understand what they're even talking about. That's why I'm saying these guys they're out of it. They don't know because they haven't looked at what's really going on. That's coded language. My taxes. Your taxes? Do you know what they're really talking about? So, I mean, I don't think these guys have made any of these connections when they talk about what is conservative. And when you're looking at MAGA, MAGA is not conservatism. Conservatism. It is not. MAGA, that's Trump, and that is not being a conservative. That does not compute with a lot of these guys. Doesn't compute with them. So when you get a true understanding of that and you see what's at the root of that, then you start seeing what's really going on. But none of them want to deal with this. So we'll just stay on these panels and keep talking about that. But these guys don't want to talk about what the real truth is here. They don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. When people try to say my tax dollars, they'll try to basically say, oh, Planned Parenthood is funded by, which, all Planned Parenthood doesn't just do abortions. It offers a wide variety of services.
They do vasectomies too.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one thing. But then the funny thing is too, people act like they're tax dollars. I'm like, dude, most people probably don't even pay enough in taxes for it to even, make a difference in the sense of like, okay, if you got rid of everything going to it, like, I guarantee probably you weren't even paying a penny towards it to begin with. Like if they had to give a rebate back for, okay, we're going to stop funding Planned Parenthood, most people probably wouldn't get anything. It's just, it's just for a way for people to really try to make a claim, to make a personal claim for something that the government does that they don't personally care for, like they're somehow really suffering for it.
Yeah. Yeah, Jay Charles had a quick question. He said, what are your thoughts on Judge Clarence Thomas situation? My perspective on Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, is that, or Injustice Thomas, is that I don't think he'll be a factor in 10 years at this point. I think that he's on his way out, me personally thinking. I think that he's kind of not really going to be critical over the next two political cycles. I don't think he's going to be that much of a factor anymore.
I have to slightly disagree, Mike, only because of the impact of his rulings.
But he's not going to get rid of. He's not going to get an interracial marriage. So.
Yeah. But he's obviously the most conservative justice on the court. A lot of times he may end up writing the dissenting opinion, or writing for the affirmative opinion as well. I just think not so much. I don't know. I don't think he probably has too much sway. I do think there's probably some tension on the court because, the liberals aren't going to be down with the recent conflict of interest that come out. They're going to see that's clearly problematic. And truth be told, Roberts as well, despite his conservative politics, he is very much an institutionalist. So he's usually very concerned about the reputation of the court. And Clarence Thomas has clearly damaged that. So I don't know how much necessarily influence he'll have, but the main thing is he still has a vote for a 6-3 majority, which is problematic, and lasting impact it has there. I will say it looks like the Senate has drafted some legislation that would put some ethics in place for Supreme Court justices, because this stuff that's come out with ProPublica, it's definitely looks very problematic, especially considering the fact that in the same year, like for example, that Harlan Crow brought his mother's home, he reported like a $500 gift for a medal. So, you report like a $500 for a medal, but you don't think it's a big deal that a billionaire is buying your mother's home. And when they're still trying to figure out if she's been paying rent all this time. So it's he's problematic.
Yeah, he is. But White House can do a lot, man, in terms of FBI can launch an investigation on his wife, man. There's nothing stopping them from doing it. I mean, clearly she's involved. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, it's just that when you combine two things together, like a lifetime appointment and really no ethics in place to stop you from being bought out, this is the results that you get. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for the highest unelectable, like these people are more powerful than the president.
Yeah.
The things that they could do, they talk about this legislation from the bench. That's all the Supreme Court do is legislate from the bench. It's just that from what position that they're legislating. A lot of people don't understand how important the Supreme Court is. This is why the conservatives did that. They held their nose and kept voting the way they voted because they understood the power of the Supreme Court, and nobody else just don't. So, you get what you get. I mean, but you have to understand that who he replaced on the court too, and what his track record was. And there's not going to be airports named after Clarence Thomas. I can guarantee you that.
Maybe a library at best. Maybe a library.
No, they did. They they did in his hometown right outside of Savannah. But a lot of people were very much against that. And it took a petition of a lot of scholars actually to even get his name into the Smithsonian, the African American History Museum here in DC, because he was originally not in it. So it's pretty telling.
Yeah. All right, man, let's pull up out of here, man. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. And share the video if possible.